Hi everyone, Bandanner here, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel, and as promised I am going to read through and probably comment a little bit on the dev blog for Broken Arrow. Obviously the intention of this video is more to perhaps discuss a few points, but also for those people who maybe don't have time to read the dev blog themselves and would just like to listen to it a bit like a podcast. I used to really appreciate stuff like that when I worked full-time in the hospital, because I could just listen to it while I walked from place to place. So hopefully there are others out there in the same boat. So this is Dev Diary number 8 for Broken Arrow, and it's a big one. It's about what's changed. As we have announced, on November 12th we will start a new open beta for the multiplayer. Oh, a little note from me by the way, in British English it's beta. You Americans who just destroy our language say beta for some reason. There's no A in there, it's BE. Sorry, I say this just because I 100% know someone from America or who speaks American English is going to say I'm saying it wrong. Anyhow, back to what they were saying. So in order to prepare everyone for it, we've started today a series of weekly dev diaries which will cover all of the novelties contained in the new build. So without further ado, we pass over to Felix, creative director of the game. So the last beta contained 4 specializations: US Armor Brigade, the US Marines, the Russian Tank Brigade, and the Russian VDV Paratroopers. Since the multiplayer battle group is a combination of 2 specializations, you only had access to a single deck archetype per country. This upcoming beta will contain 3 specializations per country, which means that for the first time you will have to choose an archetype when building your army. There will be 2 brand new specializations that will be presented in detail in a dedicated dev blog for each of them, as well as the 4 specializations you already know. But do you really know them? Because things have changed since the last beta. The specializations have been reorganized, and we have taken your feedback into account. So some units have been added, some replaced, some transformed, and of course a lot of prices and stats have been tweaked, but we will not go into that deeper detail here and let you discover that on November 12th when the new beta kicks in. So we're now going to move on, by the looks of it, to having a look at each of the specializations that they've made changes to in turn. So starting with the US Marine Corps. So first, the infantry. Many of you have been complaining about the lack of Javelin missiles in the USMC armory. The affront has now been repaired, as the popular anti-tank weapon is now present in the USMC specialization in the form of different customizations for the CAAT, the Combined Anti-Armor Team. Basically, as an alternative to the double Dragon 3 missiles already available in the previous beta, you can now choose to equip them with the Javelin, a TOW-2A, or a TOW-2B ATGM. This 8-man strong heavy support team combines the anti-tank capability with heavy anti-infantry weapons like the M2 Browning or the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher, which makes it particularly hard to bypass. On top of that, a new variant of the Marines Rifle Squad has also been added, called the Reserve Marines. These rear echelon troops are still 13 per squad, but cheaper and don't carry as many anti-tank weapons. They still pack serious anti-infantry power, however, with 3 M249s and 3 M203 underbarrel grenade launchers, in addition to their 10 M16A4s. Another important modification concerning the small squad, now called the Assault Men, is the addition of a high-explosive anti-armor rocket offering up to 600mm of armor penetration. The SRAW variant of the unit got repurposed as a heavy anti-infantry weapon, since the SRAW, that's a really hard one to say, it's the SRAW, SRAW? That's probably an easy way to say it. Anyhow, the SRAW MPV with blast fragmentation warhead was in fact the most common variant available to the USMC in reality. They've added a completely new vehicle called the ACV to the game. This is the newest wheeled transport recently acquired by the USMC, able to carry a full squad of Marines from ship to shore and at high speed on the roads. This new vehicle will provide a big mobility boost to the USMC deck, as well as great firepower, since it can be upgraded with a 30mm autocannon in a remotely operated turret. The M1A1 FEP can now be equipped with a Trophy Active Protection System. This defensive upgrade can intercept up to 4 incoming missiles or infantry anti-tank rockets, considerably increasing the survivability of the tank. The M60 Patton tank received a new upgrade, transforming it into the M728 CEV. A breaching vehicle equipped with a large 165mm gun, absolutely deadly against infantry in buildings or anything lightly armoured entering its range. I'm kind of really glad they've added that. I hope it does do a lot of damage to infantry in buildings. I guess we're going to find out soon enough. Next up, they're talking about the AAVP-7, which has received a new armor upgrade called Survivability Upgrade, adding ceramic armor to the front and sides of the vehicle. But most importantly, the new version of the vehicle is now available in the Support tab with two options. The first is the MIC-LIC, which can fire 3 rocket-projected cables fitted with explosive charges, particularly devastating against buildings and entrenched infantry. And the CATFAE, CATFAE, which can project 21 thermobaric rockets at short range. Wait, do the US military use thermobaric rockets? Oh, there you go, they do have some. So they have a small NE round, so a novel explosive, which is thermobaric, for example. And apparently the Hellfire 2 also has thermobaric explosives inside it, amongst other bits and pieces. Sorry, complete aside to the dev blog, but for anyone else who didn't know, I just thought it was quite interesting. Anyhow, Felix goes on to say, as you can see, the USMC specialization has been gaining some interesting tools, allowing it to be played more aggressively, and to reinforce this logic, we have taken the decision to move the HIMARS to another specialization, as this long-range artillery doesn't fit with the idea of the Marines being primarily an assault force. And he says, oh, I almost forgot, the F/A-18C got this. The two FA-18Cs and D loadouts have been reworked. The C used to carry only air-to-air missiles or rocket pods, while the D was carrying the rest of the air-to-ground weaponry, except for the conspicuous absence of the laser-guided bombs. So while keeping the F-18C as the main air-to-air platform, and even reinforcing it in this role with the arrival of the AIM-174 long-range missiles, we have transferred the dumb bombs to it and added laser-guided bombs to the FA-18D, as well as the brand new weapon, the Slammer cruise missiles. Completely unrelated, but I did a trial of the FA-18 in DCS. Really enjoyed using the Slammer missiles once I worked out how to do it. They're really good. So that's everything for the USMC, and I feel like all those changes are good changes. They're good additions. I'm glad they've sort of repurposed some of the squads and added in some other cheaper options like the Reserve Marines, because it did feel like a quite expensive specialization when it came to the infantry side of things. Anyhow, Felix then moves on to the Armored Brigade. So, changes to this specialization are less extensive than the Marines, but there are still several novelties like the M1150 Assault Breacher, similar to the MIC-LIC of the Marines, but on a much sturdier Abrams chassis, allowing it to throw explosive charges from a very close distance without fearing infantry anti-tank rockets. The M109A7 Paladin is an upgraded version of the A6 with more range and accuracy. This has been added along with its own upgrade, the M1299 Iron Thunder. This auto-loaded self-propelled howitzer has a rapid firepower and massive range. Just look at the length of this gun. An upgraded version of the M270 MLRS is also available, featuring 12 guided rockets with explosive or cluster warheads or 4 PRSM ballistic missiles to saturate the enemy air defense. In addition to these new units, all the modern A3 and A4 Bradleys have been fitted with the TOW-2B missiles. With the overflying attack, that's where they blow up above the target and penetrate through the thin armoured roof of those target vehicles. Particularly effective against tanks, obviously. And he was right, there's not a lot of changes because that's all of them for the Armored Brigade. I mean, it's nice to see a couple of new additions there, especially I like the addition of the A7 and also the Iron Thunder. They're going to be fun to play with. Okay, and we're moving on to the VDV. So one of the most noticeable changes, Felix says, when playing the VDV is the fact that the infantry transports can now be airdropped. This was not possible during the previous beta and was preventing the deployment of various useful vehicles like the BTRD Cruzette, which can carry infantry and also has anti-aircraft weapons, mainly the guns obviously, but can have missiles. Or indeed the BMD-4M with its powerful 30mm autocannon coupled with the 100mm gun. As a result, some support vehicles like the Strata 10 or the Sturm S that were added to this specialization during the previous beta to compensate for that shortcoming have been removed, since you can now use the infantry transport as airdroppable support as it was supposed to be. Okay, so that's interesting straight away. So they're gaining that ability, but they're losing a bunch of other stuff to compensate for that. Felix goes on to say another interesting change is that the infantry is now allowed to use any transport vehicle that you have put in your deck and not only their dedicated transport. So if you add assault infantry with a BMD-4 and an anti-aircraft infantry in a BTR-D Shrizette, you'll be able to call the assault infantry with the Shrizette, for instance. And apologies, by the way, if I'm butchering that word. But no one's ever told me I pronounced that one wrong before, so I'll just roll with it. Anyhow, for that reason, you won't find helicopters in the VDV infantry tab anymore. They will all be in the helicopter tab. As a result of this, the Mi-8 AMTSH VN placed in the recon tab, which was a redundancy of the Mi-8 AMTSH, has been removed. But a new helicopter has been added, the Mi-24PN. This is a rather cheap attack helicopter with only a single pylon wired to shoot missiles, so it has an asymmetric loadout. We also observed during the previous beta that many players were forgetting to give the airdrop order to their cargo planes, or were giving it at the last moment, which forced a plane to make a loop and realign for the drop. To help with that, now when you call in a transport plane, it automatically performs an airdrop where you called it in and goes back to the base after that. You can of course cancel that by giving it a new order. The Su-25T has been moved to another specialization and replaced with the Mi-35, an evolution of the MiG-29 with an extra pair of pylons carrying modern weaponry, but retaining the same short flight time, unless extra fuel tanks are added in place of the weaponry, of course. Oh my god, this next bit's a big one. Genuinely a bit of excitement from me there. Oh, and by the way, this time we're ready to let you play with nukes. The Tu-160 will have the option to carry a KH-102 nuclear cruise missile. Just make sure that you have cleared enemy radar AA, or this missile will be intercepted like any other, and it doesn't exactly come for free. Felix also notes that the USA will also have a nuclear-capable plane in the beta, but this will be revealed later in another dev blog, so that must be with one of the new specializations. Okay, Felix is kind of sidetracked off into talking about infantry a little bit here, but I guess it's relevant since the VDV are mostly infantry. He says one of the most regular criticisms was how squishy infantry felt, and how ineffective light anti-tank rockets felt against vehicles. We have addressed this issue in several ways. Infantry Resilience has been buffed by 25%. Light anti-tank weaponry damage has been slightly increased from 10% to 25% depending on the case. Anti-tank rockets now create a critical effect on the vehicle every time. When a building collapses, instead of instantly killing everyone inside, there is a probability for each soldier to survive. The sprint ability has been added to all infantry squads. He notes that as a result, infantry is now less micro-intensive as they die 25% slower from vehicle fire. They also deal more damage to light vehicles, so they are not overwhelmed as easily. They still won't do much to the frontal armor of a tank, but they can immobilize them much more rapidly than before, and an immobilized tank surrounded by enemy infantry is pretty much a dead tank. Large amounts of infantry cannot be erased instantly anymore by a building collapsing. Infantry combat also felt really slow, so we've made some modifications. Infantry rifles and machine gun damage has been increased. Suppressed weapons do more damage, but their range and penetration has been reduced, making them the most effective at short range compared to the regular rifles. Sniper rifles ignore building cover, marksman rifles ignore 50% of building cover, and shotgun range has been reduced, but its damage has been increased a lot. So on a personal note, as I'm sure many of you will agree, those are really good changes for the infantry. They were kind of so-so in the previous beta, so I'm kind of glad they've gone back and had a good rethink of that. It does mean they are listening to this feedback that we're giving them. Anyhow, he's cycling back to VDV stuff now. So some VDV infantry loadouts have been modified. The Spetsnaz now carry the laser designator instead of the Razvedka. They also have access to the RPG-16, a small but long-range rocket launcher perfect for hit-and-run tactics against lightly armoured support units after infiltrating enemy lines. Okay, now he's moving on to drones, so I guess this applies to a few different specializations. He says drones didn't perform well during the last beta, so two important changes have been made. The smallest drones are now flying at low altitude, making them impossible to be targeted by long-range surface-to-air missiles. and the largest drones like the Orion or the American redacted until next devblog, which are flying in high altitude, have seen their optics doubled, which allows them to operate from much further away, and if used carefully can force the opponent to send a fighter in your direction to shoot them down. As a side note, the VDV drones have received a new option to carry the KH-BPLA thermobaric missile as an alternative to the anti-tank Cornet missile. I mean, again, they're clearly listening because, well, drones were absolutely terrible in the last beta. Anyhow, a change that doesn't have any visual impact but has importance is the addition of anti-infantry missiles to all dedicated ATGM carriers like the Cornet D1. These units have been performing poorly in previous betas, and the decision was taken to give them some anti-infantry power to help them perform better. The loadout repartition is generally 2/3 anti-tank and 1/3 anti-infantry. The Sprut SD has received the option to install spaced and slat armor, which increases the protection but removes the ability to airdrop the vehicle. And on top of all that, several 3D models have been upgraded, gunners and drivers have been added wherever it was possible, and many animations have been added to units like doors opening, missiles reloading, wave breakers extending when the vehicles enter the water, dirt is added when they go off-road, and is removed when they go into water. The units play these animations from time to time in the hangar, so if you are patient you can see them do it in there. Now, I've said this before about Broken Arrow, zoomed in, with the cameras and everything else, cinematically, the game is going to look amazing with all these animations. You're going to make some really cool videos when you have access to the editor. Anyhow, last but not least, the Guard Tank Brigade. Not much has changed in terms of the units for the Guard Tank Brigade except some of the price changes and some reshuffle of the support tab. The Tunguska has been removed, while the MSTAS self-propelled howitzer has been added. The Kamaz 6560 has also been removed, which means that this specialization is entirely reliant on the support options of its sister specialization that you mix it with. Well, this next one's a fairly big change. So gun-launched anti-tank missiles range has been increased a little bit, as the window of opportunity to shoot these missiles was too narrow and they were almost never used. And the T-14 Armata now benefits from two possible upgrades, one for its armor and the other to its missiles. You can choose between the long-range, fast-flying Sprinter missile or the top-attack Sokol V missile. Or is it Sokol 5? Either way, you get the idea. He goes on to say that this deck, being heavy on vehicles and also support, will benefit from some general improvements. Vehicles will automatically use their defensive smoke when missiles are threatening them. However, this only works if the missile has been in flight for long enough, so it will not protect you against ambushes or fast-flying plane missiles, so you have to remain careful. This function can be deactivated and reactivated by right-clicking on the smoke button. Basically taking away a bit of the micro there. Artillery now moves in range of the target if you give them an order to shoot outside of their maximum range. Hallelujah, that was a much needed change. Oh, this is a really nice upgrade as well. So you can now press T, the fire mission shortcut, multiple times to switch between shell types, allowing for more reactive artillery strikes. That one I really like as an upgrade to controls. Surface-to-air missile efficiency has been improved with the addition of new mechanic of near miss, which allows the missile that would normally miss to explode near the enemy aircraft and deal partial damage. I think they mentioned that before in the Q&A, so glad to hear they've got that working. And some anti-aircraft missiles have also received new guidance type called terminal guidance. These missiles are guided by their shooter by default, but have the possibility to go pitbull and activate their own seeker to become autonomous if the liaison with the shooter is lost or if the shooter loses the target. That's a really cool addition because obviously that's quite realistic to real life. There are missiles that do that. And that's the end of the dev blog. It just ends there. There's no outro or anything. It just ends. I think I'm just used to Eugen's dev blogs where they have a little blurb at the end. Well, I think overall there's some really good changes there. Please feel free to discuss it in the comments, obviously, but I'm really pleased to see that they've paid attention to the feedback. I also really appreciate the number of images they included in this one, because it's nice to have something in the background of my video. Well, thank you anyone who stuck around. Please do remember to like, share and subscribe, as ever, and please tune in next week for the next dev blog. I hope you all have a great weekend.